Hey guys, Sean here. Today I'll be profiling my Chaos MAX Dogmatika deck. So this is very much a blind second deck, using Chaos MAX to OTK our opponent. We're using the Dogmatika cards to help us get out Chaos MAX. Pretty much you can call this a Chaos MAX turbo deck. It's really cool, the Dogmatika cards are really good with Chaos MAX. So let's get right into it. So to begin with, we have 3 copies of your Ecclesia. So Ecclesia on summon can search any one of your Dogmatika cards. It's also cool because if there's an extra deck monster on the field, you can just special summon her. This is pretty much your Stratos of the deck. Being able to search any Dogmatika card is really important. Your main target for this will either be your Maximus or something like your Dogmatikalamity or your Dogmatikamatrix. Really strong cards in the deck, and it's great to be able to search them. So we definitely run this card at 3, but keep in mind that this does lock you out of the extra deck once you use the effect to search. But of course, Chaos MAX is a ritual monster, so it doesn't really matter if we're locked out of the extra deck. Next up, 1 copy of Dogmatika Maximus. So you can banish an extra deck monster from your graveyard to special summon this, and then during the main phase, you can send 2 monsters from your extra deck to the graveyard, and your opponent can do the same thing. But this also does lock you out of the extra deck for the rest of the turn. The main purpose of this is to get certain cards from your extra deck to the graveyard so you can use their effects. The main card in this deck we'll be sending from the extra deck to the grave will be something like our Herald of Arclight. When it's sent to grave, we can add a ritual spell or a ritual monster from our deck to our hand, which is really good. It's also not once per turn, so we can search twice, which is fantastic. This card's really good in combination with your Nadir Servant. You can use Nadir Servant to dump something like a Garura to add this card to your hand. Garura will give you a draw, and with Maximus in your hand, you already have a card in the graveyard that you can use to banish to special summon it. So, fantastic card in the deck. We only need to run 1, so definitely run that 1. Next up, 3 copies of your Knightmare Corruptor Iblee. Now, we're not just using this card for the Floodgate effect, but the Floodgate effect is very strong. While you control this card, you can have special summon monsters except for link monsters. And if this card is used as link material, you can give it to your opponent. So the main play is that you summon this, link it off, and then you give it to your opponent. And then if they don't play any good links, they can't get rid of this card, and they can't special summon. So that's for the Floodgate effect, but giving your opponent a monster is really important. For certain cards like your Dogmatikamatrix, it's very important that your opponent has a monster on the field. And for your Chaos MAX, Iblee is a 0 defense monster, so if you summon this to your opponent's side of the field, summon your Chaos MAX, you can attack into it, do double piercing damage, and swing for a game. So a very important card for the deck, so definitely run it at 3. Next up, we have 1 copy of your White Relic of Dogmatika, a level 4 ritual monster. On summon, you can target 2 monsters on the field, and you can make one of those monsters gain attack equal to the other monster's attack. Another way to help you go for OTK is because you can boost one of your monsters up to really high attack. Also, when your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, you can look at your opponent's extra deck and then send 1 monster from your extra deck to the grave. Can be a decent bit of disruption if you're going first. If you set this up, then you can stop your opponent from going into certain things. Let's say your opponent summons something like an IP, you can use the effect to send a good target like an SP to the grave so they can't use it. So it doesn't come up too much, but it is a nice effect, but the first effect is way more relevant. Being able to boost up one of your monsters is really good for an OTK deck. On to the main man himself, Blue Eyes Chaos MAX, a level 8 ritual monster, cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects, 4k attack, and when he attacks a defense position monster, he does double piercing damage. So this means if you attack a monster with 0 defense, you inflict 8k damage to your opponent. So this is the main win con of the deck. If we can attack into a 0 defense monster, we win the game. This is why it's so important to give our opponent a monster like Iblee that has 0 defense so we can swing into it. So we have many ways to search him in the deck. He's your main win con. Next up, Triple Ash, just a generic good hand trap. We run a lot of board breakers, but I like to run the Triple Ash and the Triple Imperm as just good hand traps. Imperm is even used as a board breaker in itself, but Triple Ash you can't go wrong. Next up, Triple Nadir Servant. What Nadir Servant does is that you send a monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, and you can add a Dogmatika monster whose attack is less than or equal to that monster you sent. This does lock you out of the extra deck though, so keep that in mind, but it's a fantastic combo starter. You can send something like a Garura to draw a card, you can send your Entis to pop a card. You have a lot of really good targets in the extra deck, but the main effect is to be able to search, so it's a very important card, definitely max it out at 3. Next up, Triple Pot of Extravagance. We don't really care about the extra deck, so being able to banish a random 6 cards and then draw 2 is too good to pass up. We run multiple copies of the important cards in the extra deck, like we run Triple Arclight, which is very important. But even if you banish that, it's not too bad. Being able to draw 2 is just way too good to pass up. So definitely run it. Thankfully this isn't limited unlike cards like Pot of Prosperity, but even if Pot of Prosperity was unlimited, you wouldn't run it because of its halving your damage effect. So Pot of Extravagance, definitely really good card to run in the deck. Next up, triple Cynet Mining. I don't have the third copy, but you really want to run 3. It's used to search your Iblee because it's a Cyberus monster. You send 1 card from your hand to the grave to search any Cyberus monster. So it gets your Iblee, you can normal summon your Iblee, link it off and then give it to your opponent. 3 copies is nice because it's very important for your combos, so definitely max it out at 3. Next up for your ritual spells, we have 1 Chaos Form and we have 1 Dogmatikalamity. So Chaos Form is your main way to summon your Chaos Max. You tribute monsters from your hand or field that equal level 8 and you special summon it. We don't run Vanilla Blue Eyes, so we can't use its effect to banish from grave, but it's not that important. Just having a regular ritual spell is very good. Dogmatikalamity is the same thing, just a regular ritual spell, but we can also send 1 monster from the extra deck to the grave as the tribute to summon our ritual monster, which is really good. If we want to summon our white relic, we can send a level 4, being our Arclight, or if we want to summon Chaos Max, we can send a level 8, being our Starving Venom or our Omega, which is really cool. It does lock you out of the extra deck, but at that point it doesn't really matter. So definitely run these cards as your ritual cards, and Dogmatikalamity can also be searched, so it's really good. Next up, triple Dogmatikamatrix. The best card in the deck pretty much. On activation, you can search a Dogmatika ritual monster or a ritual spell from your deck to your hand, and if your opponent controls a monster, you can add a Dogmatika card from your deck to your hand as well. This is why it's very important that your opponent has a monster, so if they end on nothing, you really want to be able to give them a monster with your Iblee, and then you can use Dogmatikamatrix to go +2. It also has the effect where if you control a Dogmatika ritual monster, you can look at either player's extra deck and send 1 card from it to the graveyard. This is basically another way you can dump something from your extra deck, but it might come up where you want to look at your opponent's extra deck as well. Definitely run out of 3, one of the best cards in the deck. Next up, onto some generic board breaker type cards. We have double Lightning Storm. Can destroy all attack position monsters or spells traps your opponent controls if you don't control any cards. Really good for breaking boards. It doesn't matter if we destroy all our opponent's monsters because we can give our opponent a monster with our Iblee. So definitely a great way to break our opponent's boards. Next up, triple Droplet. We get so much card advantage in this deck that we have a lot of resources to use Droplet for. Non-targeting, we can negate a bunch of our opponent's monsters. Lower their attack as well, which can be really important for going for OTKs. Just another great board breaker. We also run double Talents, again, another great card for going second. We can either draw 2, take control of one of our opponent's monsters, or look at their hand. So we might be able to get rid of a hand trap in our opponent's hand. Drawing 2 can be insane as well. And of course it goes without saying that taking control of one of our opponent's monsters can really help us OTK. And finally, triple Super Poly. We have the room in the extra deck. Of course we could banish some of our targets off Extravagance, but that doesn't really happen too much. Super Poly is really good and we have the space in the extra deck to run Super Poly targets, so definitely run out of 3. Next up, 1 Called By. We just don't want to get interrupted. Stops all hand traps, it's pretty good. And for the last hand traps we have triple Imperm. A good hand trap and a good board breaker because it just negates a card in the field. In combination with our Ash, they're the only 2 proper hand traps we run, but they're pretty good especially with the amount of board breakers we run as well. And finally, 1 Dogmatika Punishment. We can search it very easily. If we're going first, it's not a bad card to have. Just a really good generic disruption. You might as well run it. You can cut it if you want, but I think it's really good in the deck. Onto the extra deck, we'll start with the Super Poly targets. 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, 1 Garura, and 1 Mudragon. Starving Venom Fusion Dragon needs 2 Darks. Garura needs 2 monsters with the same type and attribute. And Mudragon needs 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types. So just really good Super Poly targets. But Garura in particular is really good because we can send it off of our Nadir Servant to draw a card. And Starving Venom Fusion Dragon is also important because of our Dogmatikalamity. We can use this to ritual summon our Chaos Max, which is very good. And I guess you can also use Mudragon to ritual summon your White Relic, which I guess can come up in certain situations. But the main use of these cards is as good generic Super Poly targets, so definitely run them. Next up we have 1 Entis, which is really good off of our Nadir Servant. If we dump this card, we can target a card in the field and destroy it. Really good for breaking boards, really good for going second. Just a really good aggressive option, especially when we use cards like Nadir Servant. Next up, triple Herald of Arclight. We run 3 because we don't want to banish this off of our pot of Extravagance. When it's sent to grave, we can search a ritual monster or a ritual spell, and this is not once per turn. So we can send a bunch of these cards to grave in the same turn to search all the cards we need. We can search as many ritual spells or monsters that we want, and even if we banish 1 or 2 off of our Extravagance, even 1 copy is fantastic, so definitely max this card out at 3. Next up we have Malong, another card like Entis. We can send this card to grave off of something like our Nadir Servant, and unlike Entis, instead of destroying, it bounces. So this might be better than Entis in certain situations, so definitely a really cool card to run. Next up we have Omega. Important for a few reasons. Again, we can dump this and then we can recycle a banished card. And it can be also used as ritual material for Chaos Max if we use something like a Dogmatikalamity. Onto the links, we have triple Almiraj. Same with Arclight, we run 3 copies because we don't want to banish it. We summon this using a normal summoned monster with 1000 or less attack, which will always be our Iblee. We normal summon Iblee, link it off, and then we can give it to our opponent. We also have 1 copy of Linguriboh to do the same thing. It requires 1 level 4 lower Cyberse monster, and it acts as a trap negate, which can be really cool to negate our opponent's traps or to negate something like an Imperm. And it also sets up our Iblee combo, so definitely run that 1. We also run Secure Gardna because if we summon a Link monster, we can summon Secure Gardna using that Link monster, which puts it into Grave so we can activate cards like our Maximus. Pretty much the only purpose is just get extra cards in Grave, so why not run the 1 copy. And finally, Ferrijit as another target for Nadir Servant. When it's sent to Grave, we can draw a card and then put 1 card from our hand to the bottom of our deck. So it can be good for fixing your hand, it can help you draw into good stuff, you might as well run the 1 copy. So that's it for my Chaos MAX Dogmatika deck profile. Overall, this deck is really fun. The Dogmatika cards really synergize with Chaos Max. They're really strong in their own right as well, and it's really cool that Chaos Max fits right in. Of course, I love blind going second decks, and as a blind going second deck, this deck is really fun. So definitely give it a try. Thanks for watching, let me know what you think in the comments, and stay tuned for more Chaos Max content.